Hi guys, welcome back to the Earthly Lights podcast. Today we have a really special guest, my good friend Josh Booth. I've been friends with him since I was about 11 years old at boarding school, and we've shared some great times together, but in his early 20s he unfortunately lost his dad to cancer. This is a conversation that's been long overdue. It's a conversation that I wish we'd have had sooner, but ultimately we chose to do it on the podcast because we thought it might help some of you guys listening. I think Josh speaks about his whole process really candidly, and it's great to see that he's come full circle with it now and that he's at peace with the situation. I hope you guys take something from it. I certainly did. So without further ado, here's Josh Booth. I hope you enjoy. Josh Booth, J-Bomb, welcome to the Earthly Lights. How you doing, my friend? What's the crack?
It's pretty good. Thanks for having me on. Firstly, it's been a while since I've spoken to you, Seb. It's been
Yeah.
a couple of years, and Jim, nice to meet you.
Likewise.
What is it that you'd like to know?
Well, before we get into the deep dark secrets of the world, I think it's important just to say I know Josh through boarding school, through Skegness. It's a bond, a lifetime bond. For people that don't know, Skegness isn't in Scotland; it's actually in Lincolnshire. But we went to boarding school together. Josh, you were 2 years above me, yeah?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So you were year 9 when I joined as a fat, chubby kid in year 7. Not much has changed since then, to be quite honest. Just less hair and more of a beard. But we grew up together, basically, even though you were in year 9. Do you kind of want to just first and foremost talk about boarding school and what it was, what it meant for you, and how you look back on it now? Because I think a lot of people, at least in my experience, Josh, I don't know if it's the same for you, but when I tell people I went to boarding school, they kind of assume I was either a really naughty kid and my parents sent me off as a punishment, or that we were Etonians. And anyone who's been to Skeg Grammar knows that that's definitely not the case. So I was wondering, but I always look back on it really fondly. And obviously we share a common friend in Michael, who's been a guest on the podcast. Shout out Michael. And he looks back on it really fondly as well, whilst it had definitely had its ups and downs. But I think most people who went to boarding school really loved the experience. I just wanted to know if you kind of felt the same and how you look back on it now with hindsight.
I think I kind of fall into those kind of same kind of broad kind of categories there. Like nowadays,
Yeah.
when I'm at work or I'm with a group of friends, they kind of think, oh, you know what, I'm really posh or really, really, really well off. Parents send you away to school, but my circumstances are very different to a lot of people. My parents were in the forces, which meant that we were moving around every 12 to 18 months. So instead of having a broken education, they stuck us in, my brother and myself, into Skeg, just to make sure we had kind of continuity through our kind of GCSEs, our A levels. So I had to have a good education. Lucky enough, my grandparents lived in Lincoln, obviously about 40 miles from Skeg. So we had something to go back to as kind of like a central hub. So that's kind of the only reason we went. I didn't really have much of a choice. I think looking back on it, it was probably the best choice for us at the time. It was all right. It was all right. I'm not going to say it was perfect. Everybody has experiences of it, and your experience, my experience, and Michael's experience are very, very different. We all had kind of different kind of experiences there, which kind of molded the kind of lifestyle we've chosen today. I think those kind of relationships we formed, like you and me, you and Michael and myself, they're all very different now. We've all taken kind of really different paths. I think it's all kind of the way in which we kind of were treated while we were at school, the way we kind of managed our friendships with one another, and kind of the kind of social circles we kind of surrounded ourselves with at school. And I kind of look back on that, and there were some things which I probably look back at and think probably could have done without, or I probably could have done better of. I think more towards maybe Michael, I probably could have directed more friendship towards him a little bit, because it's a little bit more stagnated now. Whereas my friendship with you has probably kind of lasted the test of time a little bit better. Obviously, there's only just a little bit of distance there, which is always difficult. But I enjoyed Skeg. I did. I enjoyed kind of the the football matches we used to play after school. You know,
Yes.
I enjoyed the weekends where we would just like flood that TV room. Yeah, I'd say more positives than negatives in my kind of experiences there. But it all just stemmed from the fact that my parents moved around a lot and they wanted me to be with my brother, you know, and I think from a social perspective, it kind of helps going
Yeah,
forward, you know, especially into university life and stuff like that. But yeah, really, really good experiences.
for sure. I was wondering for people. Sorry, Jim, do you want to go ahead?
I was just going to say, this is on my mind recently a lot, how it's an unconscious decision, but how big of a decision it is for you to go, oh, I'm going to spend a considerable amount of my free time with these people. Because these people essentially like create your perspective around like what's a good job, like what's a nice life to aspire to live by in terms of hobbies. Like your friends your friends have such a big impact on inevitably who you become, and it's all unconscious. Like it's all like you didn't go. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I think it's because we're all kind of like-minded or around the similar age. Obviously, there's only two years age difference between Seb and me, and 1 year between us and Michael. And it's Michael's an only child, and Seb doesn't have any older siblings. You know, you kind of create that basis of like, because you're around one another, it's kind of like a family environment. And I think you fall on that and you rely on that a lot because you don't see your parents, you know, every weekend. You see them like once every 3 weeks. So you kind of had to rely on these people. Luckily enough for me, I had my actual brother in that environment as well, but he had his own social circles and his own friends to, you know, be with and do things with. And a lot of the time it was quite difficult to see your friends from school at weekends, especially when you're in the younger years. You know, you don't have that flexibility or freedom, so you kind of have to settle in quite early and bed your friendships with them really early. So I think it helps, especially when you're living with them, which helps it kind of stand that test of time. You know, so it's really worked out for everybody. But yeah, really, really subconscious kind of effort, but it wasn't always rosy. You know, we had that fallouts, we fought, you know, just like any other brothers, you know.
Yeah, I think like that's the thing as well, because when people who haven't been to boarding school, I think they find it cliche when we call like our friends that we made it at boarding school brothers or sisters. I mean, Skegness was unique in the sense that we lived in a shared board, like a shared boarding house. It wasn't all boys. So whilst like the dormitories obviously were, one wing was boys and the other wing was girls, during your free time you were living hand and foot with girls and boys from yes, like I said, I joined in year 7, but you were joining year 7, but then, you know, Josh's brother Seb would be in year 11, there'd be sixth formers, and you would play football with the whole gamma. So you'd be in a football team and there's like 18-year-olds who, like, I remember I always used to think they looked like giants when I was like 11-year-old playing football against them. And then when I was like 18, I thought, oh, I'm nowhere near as big as like the sixth formers when I joined and stuff like this. And I think Josh and I and Michael, I think we kind of saw a bit of a sea change from when we joined, Josh more so, but from when we joined to when we ended up leaving, in the sense that I think when we joined at the start of it, it was still very traditional in the sense that like seniority ruled. Whatever the year 11s or sixth formers said, when you would often get like beatings. I say beating, it wasn't like they'd punch your face in, but they would give you like petrol pumps, Josh, you know, chest taps, all of that stuff. And as an 11-year-old, you're completely at their mercy. There's no way that you can like fight them off. And yet when we kind of went into that age group where, you know, we could have done that to year 7s, it kind of, we'd faded it out by then, and that never really happened. Like we'd maybe do it to each other maybe, but we wouldn't do it to the younger year groups. And I think that had a massive, because I remember like Josh, one of your like arch nemesis was Angus, if you remember correctly. I had Billy. Yeah, I had Billy was like my like arch nemesis. He was like my like, we always had like personal bullies, and then they'd pick on like one or two of you specifically, and I think it kind of toughened us up really quickly. And like you said, you had to adapt because there wasn't the parents that you could go home to. You couldn't call up. And there's no, even teachers, you couldn't really tell teachers because once the lights went out and it was bedtime, you're all in the same wing. So if you snitch then okay, the teacher will tell them off there and then, but then once it's bedtime, they'll just like wreak havoc. Do you know what I mean? Because there's no one. Yeah, but do you know what I mean? There's no one there, so they can just do whatever they want. And you're like an 11-year-old fighting against a 16, 17-year-old. But at the time, is like an unwinnable battle. And I think as well, that also helped us probably form like even closer friendships between myself, Josh, and Michael, whoever it was, people in our own age group, because we were all going through fairly similar things, albeit with maybe different people, but like we all had very similar experiences in that sense. And so then when like Josh calls it, like when he calls them the brothers or whatever, it really is like that, because whilst I've maintained a friendship with some people from Skegness who didn't go to the boarding school, there's that level of awkwardness when we don't maintain contact. And I'm not sure if Josh, if you agree with this, but like I spoke to Delapo recently.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was an American, came over, and I hadn't spoken to him for a year or two, and we just like jumped straight back into it, and because there's that bond.
Yeah, I think it's really. I think you're really right. He came across to England a little while ago, maybe a year or so ago, and I think I touched base with him, and we spoke for a good hour or so, just on the phone, like it was just something really casual, and just, you know, I understand you went out and visited at one point, but because he and I we roomed together for a year as well, so but it was different because we were in different social circles at school, but we're in the same social circle in the boarding house, and that kind of is another thing. But yeah, I don't really talk to those kind of people anymore. You know, I think it's just really you and Michael, which is, it's a shame, but like I don't really regret that. I don't really regret that, because people go off, they do different things, you fall out of contact, and like you just look at their lives, you compare it to your own, you say to yourself, well, if they wanted me to be part of that, then, you know, they would have made a conscious effort. Because don't forget, I left Skeg after my lower six. I moved back home, and apart from yourself and Michael, had very little interest in anybody keeping me in their lives. So I was really quickly, easily detached from that. You know, so obviously you were coming back to Lincoln. You actually left as well, didn't you? You went and changed schools, and you know, it was really easy for you to then just detach yourself from that environment. And then we were able to continue like our friendship, and obviously with Michael as well. So although it's really tight knit at the time, and like going forward, it's really tight knit, especially between us three. I think the idea is that you can easily detach yourself from it when you need to, or if you can. Because it's not, you know, friendships are two-way street, aren't they? You know, it's not just one person putting that effort in. It needs to be reciprocated.
Yeah.
So, I thought that was what it made it a lot easier leaving school.
For sure. And one thing I'd like to kind of talk to you about is, like, obviously we've spoken about boarding school. I think people have their kind of preconceived conceptions of what that may look like. Hopefully we've dispelled some of that. But you mentioned at the start of the podcast that your parents were both in the military. So when you say your parents are both in the military and then you went to boarding school, I think there's a narrative that can be set there that you kind of had this really kind of strict upbringing and blah, blah, blah. But I know for you, that wasn't the case, especially the relationship that you had with your dad. So like, and then with your granddad as well, who I've met a few times, a lovely chat. But do you want to just talk about the relationship that you had with your dad? Because I always looked at it and thought it was a really special relationship, more so than most others, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, growing up, I like to think myself more as like a dad's boy. You know, you always have like a mum's boy or a dad's boy. And my dad was always like go-to when I was at school if there was issues. I kind of felt like because of his occupation, his military background, if I had an issue, he would know how to sort it out. So it was a case of, because of his ability to resolve issues or manage things in the right way, it was a case that I would go to him, because if I had an issue I didn't know how to sort out, he would know how to do it. So I kind of felt myself always kind of just like talking to him. And it's always carried on, not just from school, but like when I moved home, when I left Skeg, I moved home. It wasn't like a zero tolerance of things. It was expectations of what he wants to see from me. Things like go to college so you can then get to university because you know you want to go to university. And these are the steps you can take to get there. I want you to get a job so you can start to understand the value of money, so you're not always wanting to ask me for money, things like that. So it wasn't just me looking at him saying like he can resolve my issues for me. He would help me figure those solutions out for myself. which allowed me to kind of appreciate him as a person rather than just my dad, if that makes sense, because he's worked hard to where he's getting. He wants me to take those same steps. He wants me to understand the value of money. He wants me to understand the value of hard work and reaping the rewards of the hard work, going to university when you get a good grade and things like that. However, if things didn't go my way, he would come down on me like a sack of spuds, you know. If there was any issues with money, and I'd be like, look, Dad, I've burned through my week's wages going out with some of my friends from college. Can you spot me to get the bus for the week? He'd be like, it's not my problem. You know, I've helped you get the job. You've done that, and you know you can't be doing this. But like, he'd always just dish me a ten on the side for a mega rider for the week, you know. Or I could just go and ask Sharon, you know, can you sort me out with a mega rider? You know, my parents have been fantastic throughout. You know, both me and my brother Seb. Growing up, and I think my dad has been like he's been a solid kind of figure in us becoming the people that we both are. It's always easy to kind of talk about myself in the kind of the dynamic I have with my dad, but it's always been my brother as well. He's older. He's not just my dad. There's my brother who I can also learn from. Like, my brother's really clever. You know, he's a doctor now. You know, there's all these kind of people in my life, but you know, my dad is kind of like this hard worker, knows the value of things, knows how to get the right answer in the right way. You follow those kind of steps, you're going to get there, if that makes sense. So it was easy to kind of create that relationship with him. That's not saying I don't have that same relationship with my mum, but my dad was kind of just that get shit done kind of guy. You know, you got to learn from that.
Do you think your relationship with your dad changed at all when you left boarding school and then like you were then living with him on a day-to-day basis? Because I noticed that with my parents, it changed somewhat when I came back home after living 5 or 6 years away and only seeing them once a month.
Yeah, it really did. It really did. We were on each other a lot, actually. We were on it. My parents had actually just bought the first family home, so I moved in when they bought that house. My brother had gone to university, so it was just the three of us in the house, and it was kind of like we're on top of each other a lot, just like how you and I used to be on top of each other a lot. Like the dynamics of friendships or relationships, if you're always around and they're just constantly, you know, overwhelming. I can imagine a lot of people have experienced that during like lockdown, but like me and my dad, we had a good relationship, good friendship, but it was a case of like, I don't want to do the wrong thing because I know he'll come down on me harder now because there's a higher expectation of things. Is my room tidy? Like, I'm 17, do I really need to worry about my room being tidy? But my dad's a military man. He's going to come with his finger and see if there's any dust. You know, has he asked me to get something out for dinner? You know, get some chicken out of the freezer, and I've remembered to do that. I haven't done certain things because I'm not working for a living at the moment. I'm at home, so there are things around the house I can do to help kind of make sure he's not, you know, not on my case. And I found that if I showed any form of kind of like laziness or this, it would be a case like, look, come on, pull your finger out, let's get something done. You know, help your mum in the garden. You know, hoover up or mop, help us out with the house. It's a brand new house. Let's get stuff done. So yeah, we found like we were on each other a lot, and I don't think it put any stress on our relationship. I think it just kind of it just took its natural course. You know, being apart for a long time, seeing each other every 3 weeks, to then seeing each other every day. It's kind of like that reforming and that storming phase of kind of a cohesive relationship, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course. And then I wanted to, there's no way to like kind of transition into this naturally, or at least I'm maybe not a good enough presenter to do so just yet. But I wanted to know, like, how did that relationship, because you, like you said, he's almost quite authoritarian as a dad, you know, military man and so on. How did that relationship changed when your dad fell ill and maybe more responsibility was put upon you as a young man? And do you just want to talk about that whole process?
Yeah, I mean, it was massively unexpected, as those kind of diagnoses are. I was I just finished my first year of uni in Chester, and I'd come home, and it wasn't until we'd come home that we got told. So my brother was in his third year at York. He'd come home for the summer, and they'd sat us down and they told us.
So what was the diagnosis, Josh?
He had a throat cancer, or some form of kind of tonsil cancer, which was, at the time, it was they mentioned it to be really non-invasive, and they always keep the prognosis really good. And it was kind of just a step of like, well, we'll see how it goes, and things are looking good at the moment. Very early days. And I found it when going to the dentist. So it's like one of those ones where you're like, well, I should probably go to the dentist more often if that's the case,
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a really, really, really strange to come to terms with. And it was like, well, I'm at home now for 10 weeks for the summer. My dad's still working. I can't really see him, but I need to get a job. So the kind of relationship was exactly the same as it was when I'd left school, being away for a whole year to come home for 10 weeks in the summer. A case of coming home, being on top of one another, and then going back. So the relationship it was good for like the first 3 or 4 weeks. We'd go to the pub, we'd enjoy, a bit of family time, because we've all got summer birthdays. My dad was July, we're June. We would go out for family meals, we'd go out for beers on a Friday night after everyone's finished work, and it's really, really good. And then like my brother would go back to York early, to do his work and work on his disc. And I would stay at home for a little while longer, and it would be a case of like, well, I don't have my brother to bounce off. My college friends, I meet up with them maybe once a week, and I'm not going to see Lauren for a little while longer because we've got a holiday booked in September, and then I'm back to uni the week after. So I made the most of it, and like I tried to work with my dad with it a little bit, and we, it was a good relationship, and we didn't argue. We tried to make sure that there was enough space to kind of maintain like a healthy kind of relationship. We weren't getting on top of one another, and there was no room for arguments. It was just a case of like, well, do your thing, I'll do our thing. We'll come together at the end of the week, and we'll just enjoy the weekend. So it was nice. And then obviously I went back to uni, and then things obviously just progressed. That's just progressed from there. So I get a call once a week from my dad. How you getting on? How's uni? Been to the doctor, this is what's going on, nothing to worry about at the moment. And there's a constant kind of reinforcement that there's nothing to worry about. So carry on with the uni work and don't worry about anything, So you're like, okay, yeah, fine. That's golden. I'll just do what I'm doing, you do what you're doing, and then I'll see you at Christmas. That's really kind of it. We maintained a good relationship. I think it kind of thrived a little bit when we were away from one another. A little bit more, because you kind of value your relationship a little bit more with your parents, because you're away from them. And yeah, it was always nice. I can remember him coming down hard on me because I had a scooter and I forgot to sawn it in my second year of uni. So I come home and I'd used it in the summer, and when I went back, I had to sawn it off the road, and I completely forgot. He hounded me for it, and I completely forgot, or I couldn't afford the 50 quid sawn, and they sent me a fine in the post, the DVLA, and my dad called me up. I was actually in York with my brother for the weekend, and he called me up, and he went down on me hard because I didn't do this. I've had to pay this 250 quid fine because you've not paid a 50 quid sawn notice. I was like, oh, no. Oh, you never let me live that down.
Josh, you mentioned when you were over the summer, you were trying to make sure that the relationship was healthy and maintained solid communication. But I'm interested, do you think he was able to ever express like how he felt about the disease, the illness? Or was it always kind of like, okay, first and foremost, I'm going to let Josh know that it's going to be okay? And then...
Yeah, well, sorry, go on. Sorry, Jim.
No, sorry, that's it. That's the question.
Yeah. It was pretty much making sure that my brother and I were both okay first and foremost. But there was always this reinforcement that things are always going to be okay. I don't know if it was like kind of like a denial kind of thing for him, but it was always like it's going to be okay. They've said it's going to be fine, and I'll be all right by Christmas. So we're like, yeah, fine. We've got nothing to worry about because you don't seem particularly worried either. You know, that's really all there is to it. And I think it was more him kind of like processing it in his own way as well. Kind of just saying that I'm going to be all right. I'm going to be all right, which is kind of the mentality you want anyone with that kind of illness to have. So you've got to kind of admire that, a way of kind of managing kind of their feelings of being scared, their feelings of, you know, what it could potentially turn into at that stage, because it's so early doors. And the doctors have filled them with all this kind of information to say, look, there's no reason to be worried at this stage. So, yeah, of course, like me and my brother would then just think, you know, nothing of it, just crack on and just enjoy the summer when we're at home. Yeah, that's pretty much really it, I would have thought.
And then, do you remember the point where you thought, he isn't saying it's going to be fine? Or like, do you remember there being, oh, this is really something that's concerning him and concerning me?
Yeah, there was like a clear defining point where he'd explicitly told the family that he was free, cancer free. He'd explicitly told everybody, and we were like, that's fantastic news, great news. But my mum was like, yeah, it's not quite accurate. It's not what they've told you. It's still there. It's more of like a benign kind of thing. So saying that kind of was like, right, okay, so it's not gone, it's still there. Should we now be worried? Because it's been 2 years now.
Okay.
So he'd had all of the biopsies, he'd had all the tests, he'd had all the blood tests, and it's like, well, surely something. And then he goes, right, fine, nothing's happening. I don't feel any worried. I'm not dropping weight. Everything's fine. Must be free from it. And it's like, well, okay, fine. And then mum's like, no, it's not really the case. And then they stamp him with chemo. That's when like the kind of the hard hitting kind of medication comes in. You're like, okay, right. Now it's something to worry about. So it's kind of like, it was his way of kind of processing it, and his kind of way of saying, well, this is how I'm going to choose to read the situation. And I don't think it was completely honest with the rest of us, which was difficult at the time. It's probably, I was like, still difficult now, because you don't want to be fed that bit of information, especially when like the hard hitting kind of medication starts coming in. You're just like, well, this is going to completely wipe him out leading into Christmas and into, you know, next year. So it's like, well, should probably think about coming home a little bit more frequently, being around to help mum out and things like that. So yeah, I think it was that clearly defining moment which kind of changed my thought on, you know, what was going on.
Interesting. It's because I just remember, like, my memory is obviously not as good as yours during this period, but for me, like when my mom was sick, it was just it was like, oh yeah, like mom's doing this, or like mom's away, but like it's gonna be okay, you know. And so like I never really had a decent idea of it until very, very close to my mom's death, because I think my family thought that it would be best to like politely lie or politely give this information. And yeah, I don't know, for me, I think it made the shock completely worse, because I really thought it was going to be okay, and then all of a sudden I know it's not going to be okay. And I wondered, was it similar to you, where it came a very jolting, oh, okay, now I'm noticing people's communication about it is different. My dad is being different about it.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of when I graduated, Chester, so my third year. So we got the original diagnosis for the end of my first year, and I'd moved home after I'd finished. I started my masters, and the summer of my third year when I got home was terrible. We'd come home. My dad had been through kind of all the chemo and all the stuff while I was at home through the summer. He was starting all these trials, and he was gradually losing weight, and the cancer was becoming more invasive around his neck, to create open wounds. So it was visibly noticeable that this thing was attacking. So it wasn't just a case of losing weight. You know, you can often see, with these kind of things, they kind of protrude from the neck. So it was covering them up. And there was a week where he had a very bad bleed. So it actually come through the skin and it bled. And it got to the point where it was like, you know what, this is really, really getting bad because it's coming through the skin. So he got admitted to the hospital for a few days and had a surgery because what happened was one of the masses of cancer had attached itself to the carotid artery, which is the main artery which runs to the brain. It's often the artery which clogs up, which causes stroke. So it's a major artery which runs to the brain, and it had attached itself to the main artery. And what they'd had to do was open it up to get as much of this tumor off as possible, because if it wasn't going to happen through a bleed or kind of the way that it attacks the body, it was going to cause, a major bleed in that artery, which would have stopped the oxygen flow to the brain. It sounds really, really nasty all the way around. It's kind of, you've got an army of orcs here, an army of Uruk-hai here, and an army of like devils over there, and you're like, bloody hell. And all you are is like Frodo Baggins stood there like absolutely helpless. Like they ended up there in that day kind of signing kind of like DNRs and really serious pieces of paperwork, which said kind of like, you know what, it's kind of acceptance now that this kind of thing's gonna take my dad. And I can remember being there, and then he got released, and we went and had a long weekend in Norfolk with the rest of the family. I was like, yeah, you can go. You've got to be careful. They put a stint into his stomach because he couldn't eat, so they had to feed him through tubes in his stomach. My mum and I, we both learned how to administer like this sachet food through this machine, and it was horrible. It was really, really, really horrible time. We had a nice weekend over in Norfolk, in a nice cottage. My grandparents were there, my uncle and my cousins were there. My brother wasn't there, but we just kind of just turned a blind eye to the illness and just wanted to just chill out, relax, and he was becoming a little bit more less and less and less kind of my dad, and more kind of an acceptance of this kind of illness, which was kind of heartbreaking at the time. He was suffering, and it wasn't nice to see. And I'm sure you can probably kind of understand yourself, Jim, like when that happens to somebody, you try and kind of distance that as far as you can. Well, I know I did. I tried to distance myself away from my feelings of how it made me feel, to kind of help care for him and help my mum and help manage how my mum was feeling, because like my brother, as I said, my brother wasn't there, and I was trying to help my mum and help my dad. It's just one of those things which you try and help kind of tick over.
Did you have someone that you could kind of express this, like obviously this tremendous difficulty with you're seeing this like happen to your dad on a daily basis, you're trying to help your family, and you're also going through it yourself. Did you have someone that could kind of just be a kind ear for you and kind of help you with this, or was it only until later where you kind of got to fully express?
Yeah, I mean, I've got my girlfriend Lauren. We've been together for almost 7 years now, so big shout out to her for sticking with me for that long. So she when I left, so she was the year above me at Chester, so she left before I did, and then I moved back home when I'd finished. So we were maintaining a long distance relationship for a year or so, a couple of years. And she was always there. We saw each other every weekend, and like she would come down or I would go up just to kind of distance myself away from that environment. We would talk every night on the phone just to kind of talk about anything, even if it was just a hard day, just to kind of allow me to kind of distance myself from it. I think the one thing which I didn't do at the time was talk enough about it. And I think really this is kind of the first time where I've actually kind of sat down and gone, you know what, this is what's happened and this is how I felt at the time. But I think I'm kind of mentally robust enough to kind of accept my own feelings, but not be kind of overwhelmed by them. But I don't want that to turn me into some kind of like robot where like I don't feel about it, because I can remember the feelings on the day that I lost my dad, and it was carnage, absolutely carnage. And then I just kind of internalized everything. I was like, look, I don't want to feel like that. I don't want to feel like that, because it's probably a good thing that it's turned out the way it has, because it's not really the way I want to remember him, you know, that illness. So it's just one of those things. But yeah, Lauren was a hard shoulder for me, you know, the whole time. Massive pillar of support. She still is, to be honest, still is. So it's fantastic relationship, and really, really grateful to have her in my life. So
Yeah, I think like, as your like one of your friends, it's probably like one of which we've like I've spoken to you about it before, but like one of my biggest regrets is that like during that whole time we didn't really speak about it that much. Like the only time I think I remember it kind of coming into like any sort of like real consciousness was when I was at your house that time. I'm not sure if you can remember, where your granddad dropped off the keys without coming into the house, and we laughed about that. And Josh decided to show me this trick about how to cook pesto pasta that apparently no Italian had ever stumbled upon, which was putting pesto in the water of the pasta. According to Josh, this would infuse the pasta with the pesto. Which I mean, if he goes to Italy, he will get reprimanded for that.
Yes,
Sure, of course.
I believe that is an offense.
Yeah, but I remember that day because whilst it was a nice day, just me and you, I remember your parents. I'm not sure they're coming back from a hospital visit or coming back from a weekend away or whatever it may have been. But I remember your dad coming in that day, and like you said, he was wearing one of the scarves to like cover up his throat, and he'd lost like, because he was quite a big burly man, and there was, at least that was the image I had from the photos you were showing me at boarding school and whatever else in his military days. And then it shocked me how much he had deteriorated, because you'd always maintained a positive kind of mindset to it. And I think partly it's because maybe I didn't ask you enough. Do you know what I mean? I kind of took like your positive answer and then like ran with that instead of keep on checking up on you and so on. And I wanted to know, like, do you think, like, obviously it's great that you had Lauren and you still do have Lauren, but do you think that, myself included, do you think that the reason you didn't speak to your friends about it as much was because you weren't willing to talk about it, or do you feel like if your friends had asked you, you would have been an open book?
yeah, I think what's important to acknowledge here is that you were actually there as a friend at the time. I mean, you still are a friend, not just then, but still now. But I can remember receiving, you know, a card from you and your family in the post with a poem in it. You sent flowers to my mum. You know, you guys were there as closely as you could be at that time. And I think you kind of burden yourself too much with kind of worrying about how I felt at the time, with, you know, you not being there when you did what you could. Like, I wasn't expecting you to knock on the door with a lasagna in your hand saying, "Look, I hope you're all right. Here's a lasagna." You know,
Yeah.
I think what you did do was more than enough, and I think then that kind of puts a lot of effort on us, as the people who've gone through it, to then reach out and say, "Look, it really meant a lot what you did." You know, so probably more so on the fact that I kind of didn't respond enough, which is probably why you're having such a negative kind of experience of what you were doing as a friend. And I don't think you need to do that. So probably more on me, who should have probably come around to you and said, "Look, thanks for that. That meant a great deal and that helped me get through it." But also, as I said, the fact that I internalized my feelings, that, you know, I've not really spoken about them, because one, it was probably my first major kind of loss. You know, I don't really know how to kind of articulate those feelings, other than the fact, like, I know they're bad. You know, those feelings of loss and those feelings of hurt and pain, like, you don't want them. You don't want them. And so I kind of just internalized it. So it's me not wanting to talk about it because I don't know how to talk about them, which is probably the main kind of issue, rather than me not wanting to talk about them at all. Because if I knew how to, or I knew what to say, or knew how to kind of articulate what those feelings meant. I probably would have done at the time, other than the fact like I need to see my brother, I need to see Lauren, or I need to see my mum. Make sure that they're okay first, because my thoughts of feelings weren't about myself. They're about whether my brother's going to be okay or whether my mum's going to be okay. You know, because my mum's been with my dad, 28, 29 years. Longer than I've been around. So come on, let's sort her out first. So.
Yeah.
But as I said, mate, you really don't need to worry about how you were, because you did as much as you could. I wasn't expecting you to come and do any more than what you already did.
Yeah, it's a hard one, because I always felt like the flowers and stuff, it's a nice gesture, but I always felt like in the grand scheme of things, what does that even mean? Do you know what I mean? Like, the guy's lost his dad and we're sending him a flower and a poem, and it's like, oof. But then, I don't know, we were younger as well. I'd like to think if it happened now, maybe I'd react differently to it. But one thing that I kind of stuck out for me was that later on, so this happened how old were you? I'm just trying to put the time frame down. How old were you when this all happened?
22.
22. So I was 20. Yeah, it must have been 20. Yeah. So then about 2 years later was when kind of all the shit hit the fan with my family. So you'd had kind of 2 years to digest all of the stuff that happened with you. And so when the divorce happened with my parents and the Italian fiasco and everything else, you were really there. And I remember we went on a drive just randomly down one of them.
I think we went to go and watch a football match, actually, when you told me.
Yeah, it was Rotherham away or something ridiculous.
Rotherham away, yeah.
Yeah, there we go. Rotherham away with the mighty Imps. And it was just good. And I really, for me, that was kind of a standard that you set that day, where you were look, if you want me to, because you knew that I was going to fly out to Italy to talk to my family, and you were look, obviously I can't help in that sense, but I can come out to Italy with you if you want me to, and this, that, and the other. And I wondered, from your own admission, where you were this guy who had internalized all your feelings and didn't really speak much about it, to then 2 years later, what I would now describe as the standard when a friend's going through something, the standard of how to act and react and be there for your friend. Do you think that the passing of your dad kind of helped you become that person and kind of be more empathetic and some do you think you would have reacted the same way had your dad not passed, for example?
I would have liked to have thought I would have done the same. I think having known your family for quite a while and knowing, you, your sister, your mum, your dad, from very early on in my life, being around your house a lot, it kind of was still a hard hitter, because everything always looked from the outside very tight knit, very loving, full of kind of, gusto. I don't really know what else to kind of say about it, but seeing those, hearing you speak about these things that were happening with you at the time, they're kind of well, crap, what can I do to kind of help you get through it? And I think I would have done the same. I'd like to think I would have done the same, because I can't really say, but it's nice to see that you think that that's a gold standard of what a friend would have done.
For sure.
It means a lot, but I think even if you told anybody who knew your family, or anybody who knew the whole situations that you were going through, I think they probably would have offered kind of similar kind of things, because they were terrible things.
Yeah, I mean, you'd like to think so. I wonder. I always talk to Jim about it, and obviously he went through it at a younger age than you. But I always wonder when people who go through really hard times almost then become the kind of nominated shoulder to cry on within the friendship group, because you're almost the man with experience. I was wondering, has that happened within your friendship groups? I know you have loads of different ones, but now that, I mean, because it's not normal to have a parent pass away at the age of 22. Do you think people, your friends that maybe come to you, whether it's a passing or whether it's something else, come to you because you've dealt with it and you have come out of the other side commendably?
I'm not too sure, to be honest, mate. My uni friends, my small group of four, James, Luke, and Johnny, and myself, they've not really. I don't want to say they've not experienced any of these things, because I'm not 100% entirely sure. But relationship issues, they always vocalize, and it's well, I'm not a pro on that. I just have a good one, and you shouldn't compare it to me. They my dog died. I was well, I don't really know how to help you with that one. I mean, it's pretty terrible, and it's like, well, I can't help you with it because I don't know what those kind of feelings are like, But things like stressing, they're stressing about jobs, stressing about work. I can remember my friend James was like, I'm stressing, I've left my job, I'm going into a little bit of hiatus. Like, I took a couple of days out and I went down to London just to see him for a few days, just because he lives in a flat on his own. It's like, well, no one wants to be in their own headspace. And I don't see myself as that friend in the friend group, that just because I've been through a terrible experience that it necessarily means that I should be that shoulder to cry. I don't know if that's with you, Jimmy. Do you find that as well? Like, just because you've had it doesn't necessarily mean you need to be that person.
I don't know if I think I need to be that person, but I know that the experience of my mom passing has definitely just made me someone who is probably more interested in exploring what I think I needed. So when I heard you talk about your process after, it did remind me where when my mom died, I remember my friend Neil, my best friend when I was a kid. I just spent all my time with him, and he was just the funniest guy in the world, and I just laughed so much. And I remember those years after was just fantastic. And really, it was only until later in my later teens where it really just, I mean, of course it was there. I mean, my mom was just not there, and that was a constant reminder. But it was really only a few years after that I started to like, oh God, like this is such a profound loss for me. And it made me think that really all you can do is meet the person where they are. So for instance, if my mom had passed now, I would really want people to be able to listen to me, because I think I've reached a level now where I'm very happy or very keen to express myself in any way I can. But like I said, when it happened at this age, I wasn't. And it was just a very sad thing that a lot of people didn't really know how to react. And it's just very difficult. And everybody is in their own place. I mean, obviously me and you had very different backgrounds, and it's so interesting for me because I guess unconsciously, when I heard you talk about these experiences being bad, I totally know what you mean. Like, it's just the most, it's the strongest thing I've ever felt, probably. Like, just like this inside kind of like falling apart kind of thing. But it's funny. I remember when I began processing this in my late teens, I kind of would think about that day that my mom died and I saw her in the bed, and I would break down, like I'd cry. And this would happen quite often until that image was almost not as horrific as it was before. Like, it's almost like I saw it in a different light through going back there more and more, like more accepting, more that my mom was in pain and that this was better for her. And that I guess my view on life has changed now that I guess I can feel that like there's a part of my mom with me now. So, but sorry, like to bring it all back, it's like, I don't know if my friends think that, I definitely don't think that it's like my duty. But for instance, like you said, when your friend was going through a tough time in London, like when my friend's dad died this year, I knew I had to go home. It's not like I felt like it was expected of me. It's just, this is what I have to do. Like, it's just, this person needs me. I know, or I want to at least show him that I'm there if he needs me. But yeah, I guess it's totally different to where you're at, you know.
Josh, do you think you've like I'm not sure if you ever fully come to peace with it, but like, do you feel like you're at that stage where Jim says where maybe the memory of it doesn't hold so much power anymore, and that like you can talk about like your dad's almost you can bring it up in any conversation without it bringing up like huge emotion and levels of trauma? Or do you feel like you're still at a stage where you only are happy to talk about it with certain people in certain circumstances and
well, that's quite a strange one for me, I think, because of what the illness was and where it was. My dad completely lost his voice, and couldn't talk the same way. So by the end, he didn't sound like he did when,
yeah.
So now, 4 years this year, so next month, it's really, really sad, but I can't remember what my dad's actual voice sounds like, which is kind of the worst thing. So I have all these fond memories, and but my memory is very tarnished because I think of like things like going out and power kiting with my dad and hearing him laugh and things like that. But the laugh that I hear isn't his own; it's the one that he had at the end. So I find it easier now to talk about the issues that he had, or the issues that I had with his passing, and my kind of memories of it, because it's quite, as I said, it's quite a difficult one. I don't really know how to articulate still, but I don't have any issues really talking about it now because my memories of them are so distant that they feel like a long time ago now, because everything that happened during then felt like such a long period of time that at the end it just wasn't my dad. I mean, it was my dad. It wasn't him. So when I'm talking about my dad, I don't talk about like the last 3 years. I talk about everything before it, which is nice and only fond. So those 3 years, everything is just tarnished, and it just doesn't feel like what I'm talking about, because like we didn't create any new memories together in those last 3 years because there was no capability to do it. There was no ability to do it. It was just a case of me going away and doing things, and then telling him about it, if that makes sense. So I find it easier now. Obviously, it's been like a few years since it's happened, and you and I have never spoken about it. But that's not because, as I said, that's not because I didn't want to. It's probably because it's just me not understanding my feelings on the matter. I think. Go on. Sorry.
No, it's one of those. I think for me and you, like I've got another friend who unfortunately, like his dad passed away when he was at school, and I always felt like this complex about not bringing up my dad, because normally it is like if you bring up a dad, then the other dad kind of comes into play, and all of a sudden you're talking about both your dads and whatever else. And I always felt like this complex, like I don't want to. I'd always feel like touchy, like don't bring up a topic where potentially your dad might come up, because I didn't want to like trigger anything again. Do you know what I mean? So it's good to hear from your end that you're happy to talk about your dad's, like we spoke about them. Like I wouldn't want to talk about the military, for example, because I don't know when that would come up, but like, because I know that, potentially your dad will come up there. So I didn't want to create that conversation, which would then lead to a trigger, where it's good now that you can like bring your dad up in conversation when it suits, and it doesn't, you look back, like you said, you look back on it fondly. I think that's a really, really like positive step forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I completely agree. But I think there's always going to be like those kind of those buzzwords with people, conversations, and you have to talk about these things. And I think me kind of bottling them up over the past 4 years has kind of been just my way of coping with it. And I think it's a good thing, because it just it's kind of shown me how robust my mentality around it is, but it's also kind of made me feel a little bit vulnerable in the sense that like it's probably not been good to kind of fester on them, because like small things, they still kind of make you think about it, and you get a little bit upset about it, certain songs, or you watching certain TV, like the other week I went back to Lincoln, and I brought back some of my dad's old records for the record player, and there's certain things which I can remember him listening to in the car, and you're just like, wow, blimey, like let's just change that, because like I've just learned to kind of internalize that feeling, and you know, I'm not really talking about. I'll just put it onto the next track and not worry about it.
Yeah.
You know. And I don't know where you're at with Jim. Do you find yourself sometimes doing the same thing? Like if you find yourself like being overwhelmed by something, you just kind of internalize it, or do you kind of feel like it's better just to let it out?
I know exactly what you mean before, and I thought an unfortunate consequence of that was that for other things I couldn't really express myself the way I want, like authentically. But recently, I'm gonna say like the last 3 or 4 years, like you said, when I watch the movies or when I listen to the music or when I have these memories, I let it all out, and it feels good. Like it feels like this is a perfectly normal, natural reaction, and that I feel better for it. Like I feel like to me it's like you can look at it like this is a loss, but then often I think, oh, this was beautiful. Like this was in my life. This enriched my life. This has contributed to where I am now, and it has really helped me even subsequently being able to express myself really in other areas, because I know what you mean. Like, oh, this is difficult, and I can anticipate me maybe starting to cry, and then people are going to feel uncomfortable. I'm going to feel uncomfortable. But I think if, like, for me, it was really helpful to kind of just accept that, right, here's where I'm at. Like, here is when I watch this movie, or when I listen to this song, or when I watch this photo, I break down. And then it's not always going to be the case. Like there's going to be a time where I look at the photos and I just think this was beautiful. Like this was fantastic. But like, I know it can take somebody like decades. It can take people weeks. Everybody's different depending on the specific circumstance. But for me, it really did help, man. Like it really did. Like letting it all out was just like honestly, like I feel like lighter. It's really hard to describe. Like I feel like a new source of energy has just emerged. You know, it was but yeah.
Josh, do you think, because Jim, I forget if we said this before the recording or after the recording, but you're going to Italy soon, and you're like going to look back at some photos that your mum took with your dad, and like your dad like still finds it somewhat harder than you do anyway.
For sure.
Josh, for you, is that the case? Like, obviously you're at a certain level, but how is it like with Seb? When I say Seb, people don't get mixed up. I'm not talking about myself in third person. I'm talking about his older brother, who's also called Seb, or like your mom. Like, do you know what I mean? When you're sitting around the dinner table or whatever it is, can you happily bring up your dad, or is it like a lot more sensitive with your certain people?
I guess it's circumstance of conversation a lot of the time. We don't. I don't think we just bring them up in conversation just nonchalantly like that, and you know, just like a normal topic of conversation.
Yeah.
Talk about dad for the sake of talking about dad. It's like if we're around and like he had this bad habit at the dinner table where like if he'd finished his dinner beforehand, like he would watch somebody eating and open his mouth and eat it with them, if you know what I mean.
Right.
Really, really off-putting. And like my brother has the similar habit, and you know, and I kind of identify it and point it out when it happens. And at the dining table at home, you know, my mum has had like his medals and stuff framed, and it's in the dining room, and there's a picture of him there. You know, so it's like it's always knocking around. Like there's pictures of him all over the house. I've got some in the flat. But I don't think anybody has any problems talking about it. But it's not.
That's good.
It's not like let's talk about dad this evening and
No.
it's like a forced topic. It's like, well, let's do this. Oh yeah, that reminds me. Your dad used to do that. Oh yeah, tell us more about it. You know, it's not a tough topic for anyone really anymore. I think the only issues surrounding it is that mum's on her own and like she's living in this big house, like a bean in a can. And we don't really, me and my brother don't really talk about it. Me and my mum don't really talk about it. It's just like when we're all together, it's like when the family's all together and it brings it up, everyone like has a laugh about it, and you
That's
know
good.
it's nice. And as I said, like we don't really talk about the times when he was poorly. It's more like you look at those memories you created when they were good. For example, a few years ago, Lauren and I went interrailing, and we met up with my brother and my mum in Rome to finish off our trip. And we went to like some of the restaurants which my mum and dad went on their honeymoon one year. We went and had a drink in a couple of the pubs just because it was like she, it's familiar for her. She just wanted to feel like there was a little bit of in there and knocking around. And it was nice. It was nice. We didn't mind doing that. There was no tears. It was just like, oh yeah, me and your dad went here, let's have a drink. Yeah, fine, let's go in. It'd be nice. It's one of those things. And like we go to a place like the Cardinal's Hand, Lincoln, or we go to the Straight and Narrow.
Yeah.
They were two of his favourite places. Like, well, let's go have a beer in there because we like it. And, we can sit in one of those familiar areas where you used to sit, and it just feels normal. It feels familiar, and it's like, well, if it does come up in conversation, no one's going to get upset about it because you're in a happy space.
No, that's really good. Like, I'm really happy to hear as well that your family's in that space, and that you're not haunted by what used to be like good memories and good places, and that you can actually go there and kind of rejoice and remember not in a forced way, but just in a lovely kind of natural way of doing it, which is, I think it's probably the best. I don't know, Jim, I think it's probably the best you can hope for now after something like this.
I know in my experience, my dad didn't really talk about my mom. And just this week, I had a chat with him, with my sister, and again, it's like it's that line of appreciating and accepting the person where they are in their grief. But I also believe like what you said, like what I said, is very beneficial. Like I love hearing stories about my mom, and it's really nice. Like she was a huge part of, like, she's the reason I'm here. And I know for a lot of people it's difficult to talk about this, but then it has a consequence for some people like me, where sometimes you're like, oh wow, like I'm not forgetting, but there's just been a long period of time where this person has not been mentioned. And it's like Josh said as well, it's not like, oh, let's designate time here from 5:30 to 6 and this person.
Yeah.
But it's also like, when it feels natural, let's do it. Like, there's for me, for instance, like when I talk to my auntie about my mom, I feel like catharsis. Like it's just yeah.
I mean, Jim,
sorry.
Go on, Jim, go on.
No, where are you going to say?
I was going to say, like, it reminded me, there's like two, like, obviously, like, cultures deal with it so differently. Like, I think in the Aborigine culture, like, when someone dies, you're not allowed to mention their name anymore. It's like a disrespectful thing. But then I think you told me this, Jim, or if not, somewhere. There's like a quote from someone that says, like, you only truly die when, like, the last person who remembers you dies, or when people stop speaking about you, or something along those lines. Like, if people can keep the memory of that person alive, then they have never truly died. Like, if it's something, I'm butchering that line so badly, it's disgraceful, but like, it's a really nice sentiment, whatever that line is. And like, I feel like what you're doing, Josh, and what you're doing now, Jim, with your dad and your sister, is kind of like to that theme, where like you're still keeping them alive in a sense where it's not like, let's just banish them to the past and let's never speak about them ever again, and what happened and we can't ever revisit those topics. And I feel like if it's a really healthy relationship to have with like passing and with grief, and something that I think people who are maybe listening to this, who have either just gone through it and maybe can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, or know a friend who's going through it, or whatever the case may be, I think that's like a goal that could definitely be something to strive for, because it seems really just, I don't know, like you said, cathartic, like really a nice way to remember, to, like, I don't talk about my nan as much as maybe I should do, for example. And I think about that now, and I think, why is that the case? It's 13 years down the line, and we still, every now and again, it might pop up, but then it's literally a one sentence, and then it's back banished to the memory again. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah,
it really is just like accepting. Like for me, it's like accepting that this is where you are, but maybe like I guess I never asked myself the question, but like if you were to say to me like, in 5 years you can look at these photos and you can just think, wow, this person was amazing for me. Like this person showed me love. This person showed me everything. It's like, oh God, that's amazing. But it's real hard at the point where you're looking at the photos and you're in bits and you're like, oh, I've lost this. But it, I think everybody's going to go through a different process. I know my friend personally is going through a different process, and like there's I don't even like, I know what you mean. Like it would be a nice goal, but
Yeah.
it's like you can't really set goals. I don't think with this kind
No.
of stuff. It's, I think like an acceptance of where you're at can help you so much. Yeah. Josh, I did want to ask how or if the relationship between your family changed after your dad passed.
It's a really good question, actually. I can't speak about the relationship between my mum and my brother because I don't know how that is. It's never been bad, but the dynamic has changed because my dad's parents, my grandparents, live a couple of miles up the road from my mum back in Lincoln. There's, I think their relationship was always good. But now that he's not around anymore, I think it's quite a difficult relationship because there's no expectation for. I think they see, my grandparents see, as if there's no expectation for them to see my mum anymore because there's not that tie with my dad being there. So it's quite a difficult relationship to be. Obviously, with the year it's been this year, she's been a little bit more present because they're older than she's been helping them around, and they help her with the dog and stuff like that. So there's some form of like working relationship. I don't think there's any love lost really between them at the moment. Obviously, she's there to help and she's in, but I don't think like they would call her first and foremost if there was, a problem. I mean, my relationship with my grandparents as me and my granddad has always been quite good. My grandma and I have never really seen eye to eye. She's more of a firstborn kind of liker, so she likes my brother a little bit more than me. Which is no, like it's not uncommon. I wouldn't have thought, but it's definitely known across the family that she prefers for firstborns. So they never really call, but they never really have done. So it's one of those ones where my granddad really was hit hard with the loss of my dad. He really struggled, and like he's never had it the same way again. Birthdays and Christmases haven't always been the same for him since he's been there. And my grandma gets into the habit of saying things like she's only got one son left, my uncle, which isn't the case. She's got two sons. One's just passed away. So her way of kind of articulating it is like, well, I had two, but now I don't. My relationship with my mum is good. My relationship with my mum's always been good. Growing up, my dad would go away quite a lot on detachments. With my brother being older, he would start school or go to university earlier than me. So there would always just be me and my mum at home. So growing up, I spent a lot of time with my mum. I called her quite a lot, and she's doing as well as she can do. And I think the main important thing for us is that I just keep her close by calling her and letting her know, because I live in Manchester now, so it's like, well, I live all the way up here and she's all the way in Lincoln. Like I can't be traveling to Lincoln every weekend, not with like working and stuff. So it's like, well, I keep her call in, and I have to book weekends off like every 2 or 3 months just to make sure that she doesn't feel alone and stuff like that. And then my relationship with my brother is, it's always been good. He's one of my best friends. We don't talk about these things. We just talk about everything else. It's just a normal kind of sibling, relationship. It's not bad. It's always been good. We bicker about small things, and we enjoy each other's company. And I saw him a few weeks ago. We caught up for a beer, and I catch up with them as much as I can, and I probably see my brother just as much as I see you, Seb. That's how quickly. But you know, it's all. I see my relationships as I see my friendships. It's all got to be based on mutual kind of respect for one another. And if I don't get calls back from my grandparents, you know, and I'm the one doing the calling, like it will slowly whittle down, and I won't speak to them. My mum calls me once a week. I call her once a week. You know, my brother maybe once every 2 or 3 weeks we call each other. So it's like, well, there's the mutual respect there. There's the mutual love for one another there, and we maintain a really good kind of family dynamic between us all. So especially within, you know, us three now. And I think the idea is we're going down. Lauren and I were going to go down to my mum the first week in November, which is when my dad passed away, and we're going to go over to where we scattered him in Norfolk for the day, which will be really nice. And doing stuff like that, you know. So we still keep things, you know, nice, and we don't want to see it as like a, you know, like an annual pilgrimage or things like that. But like, because we didn't bury my dad, we scattered him. We've got somewhere to go to, and it just works out that it's, you know, a long way away from Lincoln, so it does sometimes feel like a pilgrimage. But it's the relationships are great. The relationships are great, and the dynamics are still fine. What about you, Jim? Have you found like anything changed? Obviously, it happened to you a lot younger, didn't it? So.
Yeah. It's difficult to answer because I guess there's been like several stages of it. Initially, I think I kind of just spent a huge amount of time with my friends laughing, maybe like unconsciously not really wanting to talk about it. But also, I said this before with Seb, I was really lucky that we have a great extended family that we're just super supportive. And even after the whole, like, I'm sure you notice, like if someone passes, then like people are at the funeral and people say, you know, please call me if there's any help, if you need anything or whatever. But like my family would really just be there like years later for things that they knew that we needed help for, or if we asked for. And that was super helpful because it was like I lost my mom, but then I really had several other women in my family that treated me like with so much love that obviously they couldn't replace my mom, but it was so nice to have that. And then as the years gone on, I think it was just always important for me to be close with the family, like you said, and my friends. I am quite honest with, like I mentioned before, it's real difficult for me to kind of beat around a bush for a while, and so like Seb will tell you like, oh, if I'm going to say something, I'm going to say it, and I have several really good friends that are there for me, and I feel really lucky for that. But one thing that I did want to ask also is my friend he lost his dad when he was, I think he said 21, and he said that it completely changed how he viewed life, because his dad went from quite healthy to dead, I think within like 6-9 months. It was incredibly quick, and it really changed his perspective on like, oh wow, if it can really just go that quickly, I better do what I want my life to be, or go about trying to do that. And I was wondering, did it change things for you where before you had this life and you were doing these things, and after it was like, okay, I need to prioritize this, or this is really kind of silly, or this is
yeah, slightly not so much, because I've always kind of had the same kind of good social circles where I've always enjoyed the things I'm doing, traveling and all that kind of stuff. So the year after my dad passed away, Lauren and I took a month out, and just like, she quit a job, I finished uni, my master's, and we just went traveling. It was really great. Every year we try and get to somewhere new. This year we went to Dublin just before lockdown happened, which was great, quality time. You know, we try and get out and as much and do as much as we possibly can. And I did very little in terms of new experiences with my dad. He often did a lot of things with just my mum, which is fine. You expect that between two people who have a relationship. You don't always want to bring your kids in. We went on, probably 4 or 5 good family holidays growing up, which I can remember, and it never really meant that my view on the things that I do should change. It just meant that I should probably just enjoy them a little bit more, and probably kind of maximize those opportunities a little bit more. If I'm not happy with something that I'm doing, maybe possibly reconsider it or completely change it, like jobs, for example, or kind of directions, because I more so kind of taken on the advice of take value in the things you do and appreciate the things that you get. Like what I said at the start, he taught me, the value of money, the value of hard work, and all those kind of things. If you're not enjoying it and you're just doing it for the sake of it, is it the right thing to be doing? Maybe that might be the case of it, because he spent a long time in the Air Force doing one thing, and there was a lot of value in what he was doing, for the wider community and like the country and stuff like that. Small cog in a big pond, but it was like, well, what value did he take from it? Because he wasn't being valued by people above him. He wasn't getting promotions. It was like, well, reports are showing he's doing really well, but you're not rewarding him for it. So it might suggest to me, like, if I'm not enjoying it, then just move on from it, because there's always going to be something better. So my view on life hasn't changed, and my view on experiences hasn't changed, but I've taken more kind of starch out of kind of the lessons which he's tried to give me, if that makes sense. So whereas like back in the past when he was still alive, I would have just gone, yeah, you know what, makes sense, but am I going to do any of that? Probably not. To me, then realizing, there's probably a little bit more to it than just emptiness and just a little bit of starch. I'm taking like full advice from it and just utilizing it a little more, maximizing my learning opportunities, and those kind of experiences I'm doing. I'll go to Dublin for 3 days. How many pints can I get in me in 3 days, and things like that, because back in the day I probably would have gone, I'll go and I'll probably just enjoy it the best I can. But now I'm like, let's do as much as we can in as little time as possible to kind of maximize that opportunity and that experience, try and get the most out of it. So yeah. So just to kind of summarize, taking more from the lessons rather than learning, or rather changing my view on my life because of it, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah, I get what you mean.
Beautiful. That's a perfect segue as well, I think, into the end of the podcast, where we always ask for tips and tricks on how you maintain your mental health and how you keep it in tip-top shape. So I'll be interested into hearing what you have to say, J-Bomb. What have you got to share with us all?
So for me personally, I've really, really struggled with this year, probably more like the rest of everybody else. I've really struggled with this year. I went on to furlough for 5 or 6 months, and I completely lost kind of my motivation to do absolutely anything. I started really strongly. I was riding my bike, I was running, I was, doing things which I would just do, daily and enjoy. I lost myself completely with it, and like I just needed a little bit of structure with my life. But now that I'm back in, to keep myself kind of ticking over and keep myself, mentally robust, as I've kind of referred to myself as a couple of times, probably not as prime as I should, but I love my running. I love my cycling. I've started getting back into playing football again and enjoying that process. And I try and keep in touch with my closest friends as close as possible. Probably not as much as I should do with you, Seb, but the guys who I lived with at uni through 3 years, and the guys who I really developed close relationships with. And I think the support I receive from Lauren as well is great, and the kind of conversations, the things we do, getting out as much as we can. I think real life experiences and doing things helps keep your mind really sound. And it would be wrong for me to not mention this. because of my work, there's a lot of people who are experts in their fields, for example. So just for the benefit of this, I'm a strength and conditioning coach at Category 1 Football Academy, and I work with football coaches, I work with performance coaches, I work with psychologists, and there's a performance psychologist who I work with called Laura. She's helped me previously with just kind of settling my mind through like kind of employment anxieties. You know, if you get a little bit of bad feedback, and it's just kind of a sense of just discussing those kind of issues. And she's really helped me articulate what my feelings could potentially mean, and how I can kind of like settle those. So I think discussing things with people, whether that be people, friends, colleagues, people you're in really good relationships with, getting out and exercising is probably up there as doing that. Football, running, you know, cycling, anything which, you know, gets your heart pumping and makes you feel good about yourself, and just creating experiences, going out and doing things. Get a thrill, watch a scary movie, you know, go on a ride or something like that, you know, something which gives you a little bit of feeling. Yeah, something a little bit of feeling, you know, drive a fast car, you know, those kind of experiences that make you feel alive, you know, they're
jump in a cold shower.
Absolutely. Jump off a bridge into a river if you have to, you know. You know, we have people that do it here. You know, I live on a river. Just you'll probably just see it here. I live on a river.
Beautiful.
Oh, nice.
You know, so it's like there's a couple of bridges and people just jump in, and it's like you hear them screaming and they're enjoying it. You know, do things like that. You know, just don't get caught out.
Exactly. There we go. We're not promoting any nefarious behavior over here on the Earthly Delights podcast. But no, it's been beautiful, Josh, and I'm glad we've finally got around to having this conversation. Although it seems kind of paradoxical that we'd have this conversation on a podcast rather than in private. But hey, that's the way of the world sometimes. But no, it's been really, really enjoyable having you on, and I'm really happy that we got to have this opportunity to talk as well with Jim here as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been really good, and I'm sure we'll all catch up for a beer when we can.
For sure.
Thanks so much, Josh. Really appreciate it.
Hi guys, thank you for listening to the podcast. Please don't forget to subscribe and leave a 5-star review if you haven't already. Every review helps us climb the podcast charts so that even more of you can listen to our amazing guests. We really appreciate the support. Remember to tune in next week, but until then, keep safe and have a good one.